A website is never finished, especially a B2B tech website. Welcome to ForwardSlash, the podcast that explores how B2B tech companies can leverage their websites to achieve fast, efficient, predictable, and scalable growth. In each episode, I take a big issue affecting the B2B tech landscape and then pick the brains of marketing leaders around the world to learn how the issue affects the questions B2B tech marketers should be asking about their websites and how to answer them. Let's get into it.
Tara Robertson, head of demand generation at Chili Piper. I believe that was a recent promotion.
Yeah, it was just a couple weeks ago now, so very recent.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. I'm a huge fan. I've been following you for a few months now, and I think several actually congratulations. I'm noticing that you're popping up on a lot of lists as far as B2B marketers to follow on LinkedIn, and it's just you're up there with a lot of big names, a lot of big wigs, and nicely done on that. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Obviously, demand generation. There's a lot of kind of an interesting. We're entering an interesting year. 2022 was a strange time, but I think a good place to start to kind of frame this conversation is just learn about you and Chili Piper and what it is you guys do and who it's for. So if you don't mind, just starting there.
Yeah, that's actually a really great segue because I've heard a lot since I joined Chili Piper that people see our name, like you said, on lists on LinkedIn. We're really active in communities, but they don't always know what we do. So that's one thing that obviously as taking on the role of head of demand is kind of my job to help fix in the next year or so. So just to keep it super high level, Chili Piper helps B2B revenue teams just book more meetings. So if you're a marketer, we help you book more meetings right from your demo form, so right from your website. And if you're an outbound sales rep, we can help you book meetings from your outreach, from your emails. And then we also manage the handoff process. So if you have an outbound SDR team booking meetings for your AEs, we can manage that handoff. And then also say you bring on a new customer, you want to hand them off from an AE to onboarding, we can manage that too. So really just removing a lot of friction in the buyer journey and keeping it super simple to become a customer.
And who's your primary buyer? Who are you going after?
Usually it's the demand gen team. So usually it's people in marketing, whoever owns the website is usually really involved. And more we're seeing that CROs and VPs of sales, especially you hinted at this, but with numbers being tougher to hit these days, people are looking for kind of any way they can remove friction from that process and bring their AEs more meetings, get more qualified people on their calendars.
You've been at Chili Piper for a little bit now. I'm curious what that journey has kind of looked like internally, and if there is anything kind of interesting to share before you got to Chili Piper, we'd be kind of curious to learn about that.
Sure, yeah. So I'm actually based in Toronto, so there's quite a few Canadian startups up here, but before the pandemic, it wasn't too easy to get a job at an American startup. So that kind of opened up the doors for me to being able to work remotely. So I was lucky to find Chili Piper. We technically aren't based anywhere. We're fully remote. So the founders are in New York, but we hire literally all over the world. So I was really lucky to find a company that could hire me because a lot of companies do have some issues around hiring with outside the state. So that was lucky. I did kind of come across the company in a couple different ways. One, I worked with someone named Jason, who was their head of product marketing in the past, and we worked together at a company called Uberflip out of Toronto. So I knew a little bit about the company through Jason, but when a recruiter reached out to me, I actually connected with Kaylee, who was the head of demand gen a couple years ago now, and she really sold me on the role. I'm one of those people that I try to find the manager first and the company second, and she just was an awesome person to learn from, so got really excited about kind of taking over her shoes when she left as well. So I learned as much as I could while she was here. And then when she moved on, I'm kind of taking over her shoes and seeing what we can do differently.
Cool. Okay. So would like to dive in here. If we can start pretty high level. As the head of demand generation at Chili Piper, I'm curious what parts of the buyer journey are you responsible for? Is it really just acquisition and activation, or does it kind of go a little bit deeper there?
Yeah, so I would say my focus is mainly new customer acquisition. Obviously, things are changing and we want to be able to retain customers, expand, cross-sell. So I'm not super involved in the customer expansion side, but as a marketing team, we are supporting our account managers and our CSMs on that front. But they still do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of, oh, this customer mentioned on a call they could potentially have a use case for this other tool. Let's get on the phone with them and see if it makes sense. So we're trying to figure out how, as a marketing team, we can support what they're already doing without kind of stepping on their toes, and making sure that we support them on things like customer marketing, our CAB that we have. So we have a meeting of that in a couple of weeks. So trying to figure out where we can support them, but also nobody wants to be over communicated with right now, especially from vendors. Everyone's busy. So we're trying to kind of balance that.
Gotcha. Curious what your KPIs look like. Is it, and this is like a whole other conversation that we can get into.
Yeah,
as
you
far
can
as
get
like,
pretty deep.
yeah, as far as like MQLs, SQLs, and that's actually something that's really interesting. As far as like anybody who says that MQLs are dead, I think there's kind of they're missing the point a little bit. But back to the original question, I'm curious, what are your KPIs? Is it mostly revenue generated? Is it more so like SAL, SQL? Curious about that.
Yeah, so we actually track a metric that was new to me when I joined. We call it QHM. So it's qualified held meetings. So it's essentially a step beyond MQL, but it's people who are qualified. So obviously we use our own tool to qualify them and then book them on a meeting with an AE. So if they do show up to that meeting, they're qualified and there's an opportunity, then we get that counted as a metric, as a QHM for us as a marketing team. One thing that we've shifted this year is, instead of that being our main metric, we're really focused on pipeline. So in the past, it was obviously we need to get those meetings booked, but now we're focusing on going more up market, trying to get bigger customers that will stick with us for longer versus just a lot of the smaller ones that there's a lot of tools on the market they could play around with. And we want to be someone that will stick with them for the long term as they grow and they're expanding their team.
Gotcha. QA, you said QHM, and what does that stand for again?
QHM, qualified held meeting. So the meeting has actually happened. Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. What do the leading indicators for that kind of KPI look like?
So when we started tracking last year with our data team, we call it first engagements. And it's basically the first time that we as a marketing team can track a qualified new account doing something with us, whether it's they joined our newsletter subscription, maybe they followed us on LinkedIn. Obviously, booking a demo is further down, but sometimes that's the first engagement. So we're working with our data team on using metrics from Snowplow and trying to pull those into Mode so that we can see. Obviously, we would love to just bring in pipeline right away from everyone, but that's not how it works. So instead of doing things like gated content that we're really not huge fans of here, we found other ways to work around that. So first engagements is the way that we're tracking that.
Gotcha. That's a great segue into kind of the first area they like to explore. It's, 2023, well, 2022 happened. And,
it did.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, paradigm shifts that are going on, at least discussions at a high level, as far as like what the writing on the wall, what needs to happen. And kind of what we were talking about as far as like, and MQL is dead. A lot of people are saying this, and I think that's a little bit of a generalization. It's, if we want to look at this from a high level, we can say that it's marketing's job to generate demand that sales can then turn into money. That's what that MQL is. It's just understanding what demand is, and that's what we're talking about now. And I'm curious what you think here. I just wanted to frame my first question in a particular light, and that's kind of the reality of B2B SaaS. It's hyper competitive, especially if you're in MarTech, especially Chili Piper, what you guys are doing. It's a pretty competitive market, I'm assuming. Those markets are shrinking, right? Longer sales cycles. It's harder to get people to open up their wallets. We're just being a little bit stingier with the tech that they're buying. And then you have this new understanding of the dark funnel and how only 20% of the buyer journey includes the suppliers, right? And I believe that's a Gartner statistic. So as head of demand generation, I'm curious what you think about this, because to me, it seems like a lot of B2B SaaS demand generation initiatives don't reflect that reality, right? It's a lot of demo requests, ad campaigns as like the first touch, ebook downloads that get pushed to sales directly. So it feels like we're doing everything that we can to start sales conversations, even though that's precisely what buyers today don't necessarily want, at least right away. But at the same time, it's 2023 and some companies are starting to run out of runway, right? There isn't as much capital out there. I'm curious how you think about that from a lead generation standpoint. How should companies be thinking about go-to-market, like in general right now with all this stuff going on?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's tricky. I'm definitely I believe that you can't force someone down your journey or your funnel, whatever you want to call it. So we really, as marketers, have to just make it as easy as possible to buy from us when you want to buy from us. I don't think we can force you to, or trick you into filling out a form and all of a sudden, oh, you're in our funnel. Like, here we go. Everything's great. I just don't really believe that that works long term. It might work for a couple months, but I think you're just going to end up aggravating people, honestly. So one way that we look at it is we really bought into obviously dark social, dark funnel last year. We were talking about that a lot. And now what we're trying to do is, okay, we invested in all these communities and events. At the time, budget wasn't we measured it, but it wasn't top of mind for us as a concern. Now, obviously things have changed. So what we're doing is trying to marry what we know works from the data side. And I mentioned we're using Mode and working really closely with our data team to help on things that we can track. And on things that we can't track, we're just spending more time actually asking people how they found us. So sounds like really basic in marketing maybe 20 years ago, but literally asking on our forums, hey, where did you first hear about Chili Piper? And we're noticing that certain investments we made last year are coming up a lot. Certain ones are not coming up at all. So it's making it pretty clear what we can cut and what we can get away with cutting right now. So what I'm working on as a big priority for Q1 is marrying those self-reported insights with the data that we have on the website and figuring out, okay, now that we know a lot of people are finding us from, say, our customer referral links, how can we maximize that and make that buyer journey super clear and effective? So we know we drive thousands of website visitors from people literally booking a demo with our customers. So how can we make it super clear how they can get that on their website and make that a really clear journey?
Sure. I am curious what you're seeing. I don't want to, we don't have to get too granular here, but I as far as like what you were doing last year, what was working for you guys? Was it the events? What are you finding that's working in dark social? And I'm curious, you're talking about self-attribution on your form. Is there any discrepancy as far as what you're seeing people saying they came in on and what the data is actually showing?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting. Some people get super granular and say, oh, I saw this exact customer of yours. I loved the flow, so I booked a demo. And then I look at them in HubSpot and that looks like the exact journey that they took because obviously we have UTMs on our customer links and we can see that. And other times people will say, it'll look like they came in from, say, a Google search, according to our data at least. But then on the self-reported side, they'll say, oh, I saw you at HubSpot inbound 2 years ago. So it's interesting to see the people that remember these things, which it kind of makes sense if you think of yourself. If you met someone at an event, you're more likely to remember that than that one time you Googled something, because how often are you Googling something? Exactly. So that has been interesting on events because we obviously saw a high return from events in person last year, but we thought we had kind of seen the runway of those events and we're still seeing them come up in forums here and there. So it's a longer cycle than we expected or that I expected.
Yeah, and that's what I'm curious about. Every situation is going to be different, but at the end of the day, you need to create that runway. Where does patience come in as far as we need to let the demand team do their thing and create this demand? But it's like, how do you have that discussion with leadership as far as like how far out do you look and when you actually start to, because you said you saw somebody who came into the event 2 years ago. It's like, okay, does that mean that the sales cycle is 2 years for some people? And do we have the patience for that? Just curious what that conversation should look like.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's funny when you say demand team, it's literally two of us. So we need the patience we can get. Yeah, I think it's a balance, obviously. I mean, when you're, especially my role right now, I work directly with a co-founder. That's who I report up to. So they're always going to be pushing you for more results right now. And as a marketer, I have to kind of say, like, we're not a sales team. We have to give people what they actually want and kind of trying to meet them in the middle somewhere, I think is helpful. I do think it's always going to be a balance of how fast they want to move and how fast we think we can move. So I'm still kind of working on, like we said, that runway of, hey, we did this event. Have we brought in all the, I don't want to call them leads, but like all the opportunities we could have from that event? Probably not. Maybe we're going to get one more next week. We don't really know. So it's tough to say, but I think events are also different because you kind of get a feel in person on how it's working and what the reception is to just the events you're running. If we do a lot of offsite events, so happy hours, dinners, that kind of thing, And we've just met really great partners through those that make it worthwhile. Even if we didn't bring in a brand new customer at that exact dinner, we made a new partner that now we work with on the product side or on the go-to-market side.
Yeah, that's, I am curious about that as far as the size of events. Depending on who you talk to, I feel like there's this perspective where like the mega events really aren't worth it anymore. You know, if you're spending $35,000, $40,000 to sponsor an event, it's like you really need to think about what your approach is there so you can squeeze every little bit out of it. Are you seeing that also? Is it too early on in the game to make any kind of call there from Chili Piper's perspective?
Yeah, I think pretty early on, because our co-founders used to go to events and just pitch themselves. They knew the value of in-person, but they weren't necessarily sold on us needing a booth at every single big trade show. They didn't really have that FOMO that some other teams have, which is a good thing. We also were able to come up with creative solutions like partnering with partners, obviously, but partnering with companies in our space to offset the cost. So when we host a happy hour, we invite 3 friendly companies to us and we split the cost versus spending $100K on a party after Dreamforce. So we're pretty strategic about how we spend that money. And I think that's helped us in the long run. But there are certain events where we just know we have to be there in person and we want to be there on the trade show floor. So that, I would say that list is smaller this year, but there's still a handful that we really want to be at.
Are you going to be at B2B MX?
Yes, I won't, but the team will. Are you going to be there?
Okay. Yeah, it's like 10 miles away from me. I'm in Phoenix.
Oh, nice.
So
cool.
I think I was actually talking to Arthur Castillo, who I think is a colleague.
Yeah, he'll be there for sure.
So a lot of good stuff there. Kind of a broad question here before we dive into the website, because I'm curious about Chili Piper's website and, you know, current state, future state, you know, how it's working, how are you guys approaching that? But I think kind of a larger question that I'd like to get your insight on is what's the biggest opportunity from a demand generation standpoint that, you know, B2B SaaS companies should really be strongly considering? Is it product positioning? Because like, you know, we're obviously in hyper-saturated markets where it's like, and we see this with our clients all the time. It's like, just take a look at your competitors. And it's almost like this moment of embarrassment or epiphany or where it's like, we're saying the exact same shit that they're saying, right? It's like, oh, crap, we need to make a shift here. Pardon my language. But is it a positioning thing? Is it feeding the dark funnel with just more helpful, actionable kind of content and like resources? Is it investing in community and events, which kind of has an overlap there? Or, you know, from our standpoint, we see the website as the most important marketing asset. Is it investing a little bit more in that? Or is it all the above? Curious what you think there. That's a loaded question, I know.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I think it really depends on where your company is and what feedback you're hearing from the market. So I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of people focused on very top of funnel last year and even in 2021. We had a few people doing social community events. So our name was definitely out there, but we were getting the feedback constantly that people didn't know what we did. So for me, that sounds like a messaging issue. It could also be a website issue where they would come to our site and not necessarily right away know what we do. But if you're hearing from the market, oh, I've never seen this brand, I've never heard of you guys before, when you go to an event, then that's probably a totally different issue. Because what we were hearing at events was people that were huge fans of ours, knew the brand, knew that we had hot sauce to give them, knew our swag, but they didn't know what we did. And I would get the same comments on LinkedIn. So for me, that's a huge priority for this year, is figuring out what our messaging should look like once we've brought those people to the site.
Gotcha. What's in plan there? Is it more interviews with customers? Is it integrating with sales and product and customer success more? Is it all the above?
It's all of the above. I wish I had a more succinct answer because our team
You're
is really
good.
small,
No,
but
we're
it's
doing
all
the
of the
same thing
above.
over here, right?
I think at a super high level, I want to make the most of conversations that are already happening with our customers. So instead of me reaching out to customers and saying, hey, can I talk to you for half an hour about this? I'm trying to make more use of tools like Gong, where we're already recording these conversations, setting up more alerts so that when someone mentions a specific whether it's a newsletter they subscribe to or somewhere that they heard about us, just tracking all of those through Gong so that I get an alert versus, I mean, I don't have a day a week to troll through Gong calls. I wish I did,
If
but
only.
I try to make the most of the reports as I can of just automating that a little bit. So that's one thing that we're working on. And then we do have a customer research team. So working with them on potentially rolling out jobs to be done. I wouldn't say that we have a ton of learnings from that yet, but we're really looking to switch from, hey, you're a demand gen marketer, so this messaging must work for you or this will resonate for you, because we just know that marketers are trying to do a lot of different things right now, especially with, obviously we've talked about budgets shrinking, but some teams are still growing. And so maybe that messaging wouldn't resonate with them. So we need to figure out what that messaging should be for different people.
I'd like to learn a little bit about your website. I'm curious, first of all, as the head of demand generation, where does the website fall in your purview, and what kind of conversations do you have about it with your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the past, our team has changed quite a lot in the last couple of months. In the past, it was really owned by our GTM team, which is essentially product marketing. So they were owning overall the website. And then I, as a demand gen person, would own, like, say, landing pages that we used in paid campaigns, landing pages that we would send people via email. Things have, like I said, things have changed. So I'm more involved in the website now, but we do have, I'm really lucky to work with someone on the CRO side who's super technical. So he actually rolls out a lot of our website changes directly. We switched to Webflow late last year, and I'm not super up to speed on it yet, still kind of figuring things out myself, but he has been just amazing at taking over a ton. So he runs our A/B testing as well that we do separately. And then also, obviously, we're always looking to just make improvements to the site in general.
Are there any weaknesses or points of improvement, like right off the top, that, or just lessons that you learned, as you're ramping up this initiative? I guess if we want to keep it to like the B2B SaaS standpoint, but I feel like this can be, lessons for just B2B in general. Just like weaknesses or points of improvements when it comes to websites from a demand generation standpoint.
Yeah. So early last year, and this again is like keeps coming up, but we kept getting feedback that people didn't fully understand what we did still, and like how we were different from, say, someone in the B2C side who was just a scheduling tool. They didn't really understand the difference. So we started leaning much more heavily on video. So now if you go to our site, almost every page has a different video right in the header to explain not just what we do, but also like how we could work with you as, say, you're a demand gen marketer. Then we have a separate video for a sales VP. So trying to really lean into video, and we're lucky to have a strong video team, which has been super helpful in making that happen really quickly, because in the past that's been kind of a headache for me of getting videos done on time.
Yeah, that's a heavy lift. For sure. A little bit tangential to the whole video idea. One thing that I am noticing tech companies taking advantage of is, it's not necessarily video, but it's a video aspect, but it's Novatic specializes in this. If you're familiar with Novatic, on-demand or dynamic demos. Curious about your insight there. Any plan to play around with them or test them, or I'm curious. What I am curious about, first of all, is how does Chili Piper look at itself? Is it a sales-led motion? Is it marketing? Is it product-led? I'm assuming it's sales-led.
It's a great question. Do you know when this will be coming out, timing-wise?
Say again?
That impacts my answer. Do you know around when you'll be publishing this episode?
That's funny.
It's going to change.
Gotcha. This month.
Okay, so maybe I can't speak to it too much, but I'll just say we're at an interesting time where right now we're about 50-50 marketing or inbound and sales led right now. But we will be rolling out a PLG motion in the next few months, which will, I'm thinking, just allow way more people to play around with our product, which right now we can't do.
Sure.
So that'll be really exciting. So that's why we've held off on the interactive demo element, just because we've known this was coming. But I would love to get my hands on something like a Novatic, or I know there's others in that space.
Right. Okay, cool. One of the areas that I have really been diving into, and this kind of brings in the whole idea of jobs to be done and really understanding, getting granular with customers, and we're only starting this also. Like, this is something that I kind of found a month ago, and I've actually been collaborating a little bit with Stratagen's head of growth. His name is John Dome, and they're the people that actually pioneered this. But strictly from like a resources standpoint, I feel that websites aren't what they could be. And I see this as a huge potential from a demand generation standpoint, right? Like most companies should have a blog, right? But I find that that's mostly like how to and what is content. And I think there's more of a transition now into like creating templates and calculators and toolboxes, kind of really understanding all the little finite things that your customers are trying to get done that kind of surround your product. Do you agree with that? Do you think that websites just aren't what they could be from a demand generation standpoint?
Yeah, I think you're right, especially a lot of blogs that I go to still are very much like, here's why our CEO created this tool, or like, here's how our CEO did this. And that's just not really helpful to me as a buyer. I want to know what your customers are doing. And that's where obviously templates can be so useful. We talk about all the time, like, what else can we make that people would find useful? Can we build some kind of like grader for people's demand gen programs? Can we give them templates? What are we doing internally that we can kind of almost productize as an offer? So we talk about that a lot. I think we're still trying to figure out what that looks like for us, but pretty much anytime we share something internally that's like a really useful resource, like we use Airtable right now to manage our A/B tests and what's coming up on the A/B testing front. So that's the kind of thing that I want to start making available externally as a resource to people. And even in the communities I'm in, just on Slack communities, people are always sharing resources and templates, and those get a ton of traction versus a blog post or interview style content.
Yeah, that kind of content's just going to perform a lot better in the dark funnel, right? I think it's a great way to get some evangelism behind your brand without having anybody buy your product. Ahrefs does this really well, I think. It's like I've had people recommend me Ahrefs, and they themselves have never actually used the product. They just know all about it because the content around it is so good and they know what to expect. I think that's really the future of websites. It's just like this support ecosystem, if you will, more than just like products, like heavy content.
One pagers.
Yeah, it's like one pagers, which is good. You can't survive without that, right? At the end of the day, like you need a home page, you need solution pages, industry page, about us page, but it's like there's so much more other stuff out there that I think from a demand generation standpoint we could be doing, and we're starting to scratch that surface.
Yeah, one thing we're playing around with too, well, I shouldn't say playing around, we're further along than that, but it's not live yet, is we're doing a bunch of different playbooks on basically just, we have so many different ways that you can use our product. So not necessarily to sell it to you, but more to show like, here's how this customer is doing X with us, plus our Clearbit integration, plus this other integration. And then we're pairing all of those into more of a story than, like you said, a product like one pager or just a comparison chart kind of page.
Totally. How's the university going? That's a resource that I was kind of interested in. I imagine that's more so from like an activation retention standpoint, or is that playing any kind of demand generation role as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, we're pretty focused on getting our existing customers to use it and play around with it, including ourselves internally. We pretty much every time a new one comes out, we all try to get it done as fast as we can internally, just to try it out first. We haven't done a ton on the demand gen or kind of like net new with that. I do think there's something there. It's always tough to get someone who isn't a customer to spend time on a resource that focused on yourselves or your own product.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that one day we can release one that's more high level of just kind of like demand gen basics or conversion basics and get people in the funnel that way.
Cool. Very cool. I really appreciate your time. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you if you can hang around for a little bit longer.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been kind of, with each passing episode, I'm just like, oh, I should ask that at the very end, because this is like a segment that I picked up on a lot of what people are doing. It's like that's kind of fun.
It's hard to come up with new ones all at once. It helps if you can add them. Yeah.
Sure. One thing I'm curious about is, I can't remember who I got this question from, but I really liked it. What is something about you that makes you successful that somebody wouldn't be able to find on like your LinkedIn profile for your resume?
I think I definitely don't think I would put this on my LinkedIn, but I just get stuff done. Like, I know that sounds really basic, but it's surprising to me the amount of people I work with who just talk about things or build decks or brainstorm. But if we leave a meeting and say we're going to do something, then I'm the person that goes and starts doing it. So maybe I'll put it in Asana, maybe I'll do it myself, but usually it's going to get done if we talked about it in a meeting.
Action oriented. That's
yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, that's what I can put on my LinkedIn.
What's something that you're really passionate about in your personal life?
I have 2 rescue dogs,
yeah.
so I just think everyone should consider rescue if you're going to get a pet. Best way to get them, and yeah, they're the best, especially mutts.
Totally, yeah. It's a good way to get those. Was it the serotonin increase? Just like cuddling with your puppies. Cool. No, I agree. What do you wish more B2B SaaS marketers did more of?
I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but I think one thing I would love to see more of is people sharing just big flops. So things they tested that didn't do well. I think there's a reason that people stop talking about best practices because they stop working after a while.
Right.
So I'd love to just hear what people are doing that they tried that really flopped, because maybe it'll work for someone else. So
agreed. And kind of overlapping with that is this idea of building in public. You see people like Camille Trent over at Peer Signal doing this. Just a lot more people are being very vulnerable and just like posting ideas and their whole processes, which, I feel like depending on who you talk to, they're like, that's just like too much information. We can't give away the secret sauce. Do you agree with that?
I think it definitely has overlap with what I was talking about. I think one thing that I see, especially on LinkedIn more than anywhere else, is just everything is like perfect, or we're hitting our numbers, everything's great. And you hear all that. So then when you do see the news about, like, say, layoffs, for example, it looks so jarring on your feed to see those 2 things. So seriously, I would just love to see more of kind of that gray area of people just figuring things out as they go.
Cool. And who are your favorite people to follow? Where do you get your insights from? Yeah.
So speaking of building in public, I think the guys at Metadata do a ton of that. Jason and Mark share a lot of what they're learning behind the scenes, really like their stuff, especially their podcast. And then also someone I know personally, Amrita Mathur, she's the VP marketing at Superside, and they're doing some really interesting stuff on not just demand gen, but their whole go-to-market is just really interesting to follow.
And then obviously Demand Gen Chat is a great resource. Anybody listening, check it out. By the way, quick question on that. Do you do most of the production yourself, or who do you use for that side?
Yeah, so we have a video guy, Nolan, internally, who helps me clean it up, but we also use Descript or Descript. you said Descript earlier, and I'm questioning if I'm saying it right. So we kind of both will make notes in there, and then he cleans up the final files.
Have you used the functionality where it learns your voice and then you add that into your discussions yet? Okay.
I haven't. That sounds creepy though.
It does, doesn't it? It's a little bit creepy, but I'm also really intrigued with it. It's there's this little corner in Descript where it tells you just to talk into a microphone, and then I guess you can highlight whenever you upload a file, like where you're showing up in that script, and over time it learns your voice. So then you can just like, I should have used this word instead of that word. You can go into the file directly or the document.
Swap it out. That's
I haven't used it yet. I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, we use it to the filter words thing is what I like it for the most, because you realize things that you say and you wish you never had to hear yourself say that again. So that's really useful to just edit them out.
Totally agreed. So we mentioned how Chili Piper is going to be a part of B2B MX. Are you going to be at any other events or any other events that you want to let listeners know about that you guys are going to be participating in?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so we will be at B2B MX. We do have some kind of happy hour, so definitely come find us for an invite to that. We're also going to be around a lot of major events, like we're at Adobe Summit, Inbound in the fall, and those are the biggest ones. I'm not sure which ones I'll be at yet. I'm missing B2B MX because I'm going to be traveling for my honeymoon. Otherwise, I'd be there because I haven't been to Scottsdale yet. But...
Nicely done. Where are you going?
We're going to Costa Rica.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, just for a couple of weeks.
Tara, this has been great. I thank you for letting me just pick your brain around demand generation and everything that's kind of in store for Chili Piper. But yeah, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much, Adam. That was really fun.